Well, good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's Audit and Governance Committee on 24th of July 2025. I'm your Chair, Councillor Chris Burrup. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We're not expecting a fire drill. We've already had one recently at full council, so wouldn't expect another drill so recently. If we do hear a fire alarm, please proceed to the exits marked by the green running man and assemble in the car park as usual. So that would be great, but that's health and safety, I think. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call and declaration of interests of committee members here present. Over to you, Alethea.
Okay, so when I state your name, could you state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to, exactly what the interest is, and the specific type of interest. So, Councillor Chris Burrup.
Present and nothing to declare, thank you.
Councillor Ollie Davey.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Ian Barlow.
Present, nothing to declare that I'm aware of.
Councillor Roy Collins.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Charlotte Fitzgerald.
Present, no declarations of interest, thank you.
Councillor Mike Goodman.
Present and no declaration of interest.
Colin Brown.
Present and no declarations.
Thank you. And Councillor Judy Levine.
Present, no declaration, thank you.
And we've got our independent person, Rob Ward.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you.
Okay, so we move on to agenda item 1, which is minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has any comment on the sets of meetings from the 20th of March 2025, please do this by raising your hand. I have no hands raised. I'll take this as an indication that you all agree with the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'll take that as they are agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 2, we have apologies from Councillor Kim Bloxham and Councillor Fabian King. And any other apologies?
No other apologies received.
Thank you. So agenda item 3, we've done declarations of interest. Agenda item 4, public speaking. I don't believe we have anybody registered to speak. Thank you. Flying through the agenda. Agenda item 5, late items or matters of urgency. I, as chair, have none. And agenda item 6, confidential or exempt items. Again, I've been not made aware of any. So we move on to agenda item 7, internal audit annual opinion 24-25. And this is pages 6 to 20. And it's a report from Lisa Fryer. Over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're required to deliver an annual internal opinion on the effectiveness of governance, risk management and control processes. For 24-25, we've given a reasonable annual opinion. The outcomes from delivery of our agreed plan provides the evidence to support this opinion. These outcomes are covered within our summary on the first page of our report, with more detail on pages 12 and 13. In terms of plan delivery, we've got a good basis for the opinion as the plan has been substantially delivered. 91% of our plan is now at report stage. The work that underpins our opinion is our assurance work. We've got a risk-based approach, and that means that we would expect to report a proportion of limited assurance outcomes. Senior management regularly ask us to review areas where they've got existing concerns or want independent assurance or advice. In 24-25, 58% of our audit work was reasonable or substantial. This is an improved position compared to 23-24. And the reasonable assurance work that we conducted covers key financial, governance and operational systems. We did report a high organisational risk in the year, and that was in relation to electrical safety. Our action tracking and also meetings with senior management have informed us that agreed action has been implemented. We are now receiving evidence to support this assessment, and have started a formal follow-up. As well as demonstrating support for our work, senior management have a clear commitment to improvement. Action plans to address weaknesses reported have been readily agreed across the year. Over 24-25, we also developed an action tracking process. The number of old actions has now reduced, and the implementation of more recent actions is also now increasing. We do recognise there is still more work to do here, though, and we will be continuing to monitor this closely during the current financial year. In terms of internal audit arrangements at the Council, oversight of internal audit outcomes by senior management has increased during the year. This is in particular in respect of monitoring the agreed actions. Quarterly, we now attend senior leadership team meetings and meet with the Chief Executive. This is in addition to monthly meetings with the Section 151 officer. To give our opinion, we need to have a breadth of coverage of audit work, covering key services and in relation to strategic risks. We produced a table on page 14, and this shows that the majority of strategic risks have been covered by audit work during 24-25. Finally, in relation to SWOT performance, an overview can be found on page 51. A key measure for us are the results of satisfaction surveys that are sent out on completion of an audit. We are pleased to report that for the responses received, we've all met or exceeded expectation. The internal audit standards that we follow require auditors to commission an external quality assessment on conformance with the standards at least every 5 years. SWOT's most recent assessment was published in December 2024 and concluded that SWOT generally conforms. This is the highest grade available. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
I love the fact that the highest rate of that available says it generally conforms. I think that's
Disappointing.
That's damned by faint praise, I think that's called. But congratulations in effect. But in seriousness, any questions for Lisa on this report, please? From outside the committee first, any questions? No? Inside the committee, yes, Rob.
I'm just wondering to ask about the IP risks.
Sorry, Rob. Could you use the microphone?
Yeah, on the strategic risks, it says that the IT ones are covered by Strata, obviously, as your IT subcontractor. But I hope that doesn't mean that, from an internal audit perspective, you therefore sort of ignore it and go, it's part of them, because that has to be a very primary risk. And recent events in the commercial world have only gone to do that. And whilst you can delegate the management of a risk, you can't delegate the risk. If it fails, this council, and it's unclear to me how that's covered with the comment just covered by an external organisation.
Lisa, would you like to come back on that?
Thank you for your question. Yes, so Strata is a company made up of 3 local authorities, districts in Devon, and collectively Strata is audited by the Devon Audit Partnership rather than ourselves. So there will be a separate report coming to this committee specifically on the ICT risk from the Devon Audit Partnership that will cover just what you've said.
Councillor Goodman, you had a question? Sorry, microphone, thank you.
Are we looking at items 7 and 8 together, or just 7 first and then following 8?
There is overlap, I do appreciate that. I think that
could you switch on?
Oh, sorry.
We were going to take them as separate items, but I do appreciate there is overlap. I think the next one will look more at the limited assurances, and there's more detailed on the action tracking.
If I can stick with the agenda item 7 first of all. A couple of things there. The officers report housing. They have completed almost all the actions, What does that actually mean? That's the first point. And I'm the same with housing. On page 6, it talks about the electrical safety being very concerning, and then it talks about turnover of staff. Are we confident that we're going to put that right? Because I know it comes in your second, in item 8 as well, but that to me is quite a crucial point. The next point is, I think it's worth noting, the improvements, you did mention it, but actually we've got no advisory this time, whereas in 2023 we had 20% were advisory. So there has been a significant change in improvement in what you're finding, and I just wondered if there's anything you could put that down to. And my next question is, I see on page 9 that the client satisfaction is increased from 98% to 100%. What caused that improvement, which is good to hear? And the last thing is, and it may be, Chair, we have to take this in Part B, but in Appendix A, there are 3 confidential items that you're looking at, and I just wonder, can we know what they are? Should we know what they are? That's all for agenda item 8.
I hope you've got all that, Lisa. Yeah. Okay, have a go.
So the first one was an action tracking question, wasn't it? And are we looking on page 17, the table there? Can you just remind me exactly?
Well, the first one for me really is that housing.
Microphone, please, Mike.
The first point, who says that they completed almost all the actions. What does that actually mean? Almost to me means we haven't done them all, but is it 50%? Is it 70%? And are there serious things they've not done? I think this council, this committee ought to know. So that's the first one.
We'll get it right one day, won't we? So housing have reported that 8 of the 9 actions from the action plan have been completed.
8 of the 9.
8 of the 9. That information is included under Appendix A, actually, in the table there. That does give you a breakdown of where all of the number of actions that have been made across the year per audit, and also the status of those as well.
And then
Sorry, microphone.
you also then go on to say that the turnover of staff has been great in HB. Are we confident that we can address those issues? Because I see it's quite important.
So in terms of the turnover of staff, that was a factor that affected the original audit when it was done towards the end of 23-24. It started and it delayed the completion of that audit. So there is now a full new management team in place and a new electrical compliance surveyor. So we don't have the same concerns about turnover at the moment. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the other part of the question.
Sorry, microphone, Mike.
The fact that you, Chair, you actually mentioned that the improvement in the summary on 2023 to 2024, and you were talking about the stanchion reasonable, and that's changed. But also, what's changed is the advisory. In 2023, we had 20%, which is not good. Now we've got none. What do you put that down to?
Do you mean the proportion of advisory audits as a percentage in the plan? So in the introductory page, we had 6 advisory reviews this year. So actually, there were more this year because we had a number of confidential requests. So the number of advisory audits actually increased this year compared to the previous year. So there's a table on page 9, assurance opinions, that compares the breakdown of the assurance opinions from one year to the next. So the advisory and other section shows there were 3 last year. This year there's been 6.
What does that actually mean?
Mike, please use the microphone.
How serious is that?
We can be asked to do advisory reviews for a number of reasons. So I'm not sure it's necessarily a sign of something more serious is happening, but we've received a number of requests during the year to do advisory pieces of work. That will include, I think, the three pieces that you mentioned in your question earlier.
Anything else, Mike?
Just the two things. One, the fact that the client satisfaction has increased 98 to 100%. That's encouraging. And then the last one was the three confidential items.
So the client satisfaction surveys is increased from 98% to 100% because we've only received 100% scores on the client satisfaction surveys this year. I don't know if there's a particular reason for that. Sometimes the comments are included in the survey, sometimes they're not. So we get a grade assessment basically. So hopefully that's okay for that one. In terms of the three confidential reviews, one of those three has already come to this committee previously as a Part B. And the other two, I presume we would be able to share.
We could schedule that, couldn't we?
We would be able to share information about those if we were able to schedule it. I believe one of them, we might need to have a chat with Mark.
Yeah, and bring on the county fraud
Presumably under a Part
officers.
B going forward.
What you said when I said that there were no advisory in 2024, I'm looking at page 16, and it doesn't show any advisory there. Table 1, Summary of Assurance Opinions, 24-25.
So yeah, the table only shows the assurance opinions because that's where we're deriving the annual opinion from, if that makes sense.
Microphone, Mike.
There's no advisory ones on there, is there?
We should just yell, really, shouldn't we? We made a point in the opinion about the proportion of the percentage of substantial and reasonable as opposed to previous year, and we've just made sure that the table there corresponds with that percentage that we referred to in the opinion. So the advisory work still happens, we've just not incorporated it into that table. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. Want to bring in Simon, the 151 officer.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just a misunderstanding, and I may have got this wrong by listening to the conversation going on between the two. But advisory is whereby it's not an assurance grade given to it, and I'm wondering whether that's where your advisory isn't sort of like a limited assurance or a reasonable assurance. Advisory means it's outside of that. We've asked SWAP to do a particular piece of work for us, but it doesn't get an opinion at the end of it. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and use my microphone correctly. They've been brought up already, but I'd go back to strata. I was a little bit concerned about that as well, because of all the things in the news, etc. And it's all very well saying, well, it's broken, they're going to fix it, because I understand they do it for us. But are we prepared so that all the computers are down? Can we carry on? That to me is the thing that we need to be able to do. Telephones go down. How do we work? Is there a battle plan under the drawer that we pull out and say, right, well, okay, we go back to this, that, and the other? I don't know whether that's even relevant, but that was my concern.
So
on that.
actually, as I understand it, SWAT have just done an internal audit review of the disaster recovery plan and business continuity plan. So we actually have those within the reports here. So those reports are in place.
Excellent. Okay. Then you've got, and again, I don't know if this is in this bit or the next bit, but I read that due to time constraints, you haven't fully assessed the compliance for invitation to tender. Now, at the present time, that's quite important to this town council because we're either doing or about to tender for many things, and I just wondered, are we getting around to doing that imminently?
Over to you, Connor.
Yep, so the comment about invitations to tender, so you're talking about a comment on the front page of the Local Government Transparency Code report. So the scope of that audit was to check that the council is meeting publication requirements in respect of a number of different areas that the code requires. So we've not actually done an assessment of invitations to tender in lines of following the procurement rules, the audit was to look at whether the publication of invitation tender meets the standards set out in the Local Government Transparency Code.
So what you're saying was it wasn't subject to the scope of that particular audit? Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't done an assessment of procurement processes in that audit.
Okay. Yehudi.
Thank you. I've got a cosmetic question. I started reading the report and I got to page 6 and my jaw dropped and I said to myself, oh my God, we're going to have electrical problems in our houses because this is a significant risk. You've got it down, it is high, housing electrical safety. My first reaction was, it's bad. What are we going to do about it? And then I started reading further and it was all administration. So I was wondering if we can present things a little bit differently so that I don't have palpitations next time I read the report. Because what worries me, to be honest with you, what worries me, if this falls in the hand of one of the less, what shall we say, a journalist, this is wonderful headlines. Housing in East Devon is unsafe because they see this as a high risk. So I think, sometimes the presentation could possibly be improved. But just a question.
Is it a question or a statement, Yehudi? Is it a question or a statement? Okay, right. Well, okay, I think speaking on behalf of SWAP, I think the point is noted, but we'll try and take more care with how we address these and entitle these reports, but these things can be interpreted differently. One point from myself, if I may, and that's that we have seen some significant progress, what the report's saying, in terms of reduction in outstanding management actions. So that's encouraging. And whilst we've got two members of the senior leadership team here, I was wondering if we could just inquire how that process is being undertaken in terms of the review and action process, because I know that's what was stalling it in the first place, and how are we seeing differences now? So what's changed, if I may?
I'll start and Chiffy said might come in. So I think in terms of a number of areas, one is the review by SLT. So our senior leadership team, as was described, now have reports regularly, and SWAP come along and go through the actions in terms of what's outstanding, what's overdue. So we now have, as a senior management team, have an overview of what actions are there. That's one thing. That also gets reported to ELT in terms of those that are escalated as being out of date or high priorities. Also, I think working with SWAP in terms of the audit board. So that's the software they use to put their recommendations on, to track and monitor it, and what formulates these reports that come to you. All our managers now who have actions that SWAP have allocated to have had training. They know how to use the system now and update it, and we can all see the actions when they're due to be completed by and progress, so it's full transparency on that. And in addition, just to help, I think we've just turned on, but I'll look over there, email notifications of when actions are coming up to their expiry date in terms of should be done. So it's a combination of things, I think.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I mean, of note, 108 open actions, 7 priority 1 actions, no priority 1s are overdue. So that's a significant improvement on where we have been as a council in terms of the actions being reported. And that's despite SWAP's best efforts at loading more and more actions on with all the reports that they undertake. That, I think we're starting to make inroads into it. So I think that should be commended personally. Go outside committee to Councillor Loudon. Okay, sorry about that, Councillor Lamb. We are muting democracy here. Any other questions? Councillor Barlow.
Just on the confidential reports again, we can't talk about them now, but I wonder if they could be in the intranet, whatever, somehow displayed on there, because again, I had that written down three, I thought it was 5, but anyway, that I just wanted to know, what are we looking at?
I think it would probably just be appropriate for us to put them on the agenda of this committee, personally, but thank you. Okay, if there's no other comments, then we are asked to note this report, so there's no vote required, so consider it duly noted. Okay, thank you. We move on to item 8, which is the internal audit progress report for Q4 24-25, and it's our friends from SWAP again.
It's me this time. Although we have actually just strayed into that report anyway, I think, but just to point out a couple of bits. So, yes, we had a comment that the reports are very similar. Obviously, they're written at the same time, so they reflect some of the same information, but the progress report is the same format every time, which is why it does that. I'm only going to go over some of the areas that aren't mentioned in the annual opinion, and I think we've covered some of it anyway, but I'll go over some of it. Page 28, there is a chart on there which confirms again the progress against the plan as a whole. So that shows 17 audits completed of 21. Just to say, we've completed another audit from this plan since this report has been written, so we're now at 18. Pages 30 and 31 are summaries of the limited assurance opinions that have been issued since our last report to the committee. So the first of those is business continuity. You raised a question on that already, but the things that we found during that review, sort of main things that we found during that review, contributing to that are the fact that there haven't been any recent tests of business continuity plans. That's not a regular part of activity. That has now been agreed to happen in the future. There will be a test of the corporate BCP, and there'll be an update of that following that exercise. We also found some discrepancies between service level business continuity plans will have their key systems in them and their recovery time objectives, but we found that there were some discrepancies between what was in the service level BCPs as opposed to what's in Strata's disaster recovery plan, which mean you may have services expecting systems to be restored much more quickly than the provider is actually going to restore them. So there's been an agreement to review the list of all systems and make sure that those marry up. In terms of the local government transparency code audit, that was also a limited, and as I mentioned earlier, that was basically a compliance audit to check whether the council is compliant with all of the requirements of the mandatory requirements of the code. There were a few, I will say that most of the data required by the code is published, so that's a positive, but there were a few data sets where we found it was either significantly out of date or missing parts of the disclosure requirements and so forth. The only other major thing to note there is that there didn't seem to be anyone coordinating the compliance, the council's compliance with the code. So we've agreed with the monitoring officer that the Information Governance Board will take that on going forward, and actions to address those 4 or 5 sort of the 4 or 5 disclosures that have got more significant problems on them. They've been agreed individually with the relevant service areas. We've touched on the action tracking already, but that summary is on page 33. So yes, the number of outstanding actions has reduced since our previous report. I think we've closed 49 actions since the previous one, so there has been a bit of a process to go through, get evidence from services to show what they've been up to. So we're happy with the level of progress that's been made. And then pages 35 through to 59 are the progress updates on the outstanding actions. I won't go through all of them because there's quite a few there, but if there are any questions about that section of the report, happy to take them.
Thank you. I must use the microphone. Before we go to questions, we've actually got some officers from the relevant departments who were audited here, so really appreciate their time for attending today. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, particularly about the business continuity or transparency audit reports format.
It's Dave Whelan. I'm the Business Continuity Officer, Emergency Planner for East Devon, and I work closely with my colleagues in Strata, but also regards to all of the plan owners. We have approximately 20 service plans which are in place, and there were a number of them that had recovery time objectives that were less than was promised by Strata. That has been part of a review that I have started, and I sent out in this week. It's taken me this long since the audit finished to get it ready, to send an 11-page email out for people to do a review of the whole 20 plans, which will then inform our corporate plan. There was some stuff that I picked up with regards to exercising. The exercising at the end of last year was being considered, but unfortunately I hadn't had the training, which meant I could write our own training. I've since had that, so this year we're taking on a training session for 5th of November. However, we did do training, but not the sort of training that was requested by SWAT, because that's the best model that you could go for, is having that in-place process testing. I have now had the training to be able to deliver that, but to get around that, I conducted 20 SL interviews with senior leadership team to go through every single plan, and we did a discussion-based exercise. So we went through risks, we went through capability, and the services, how they would deliver. So that's should have been captured into the plans, but unfortunately some of it got captured into people's heads, and we're now trying to get it so the fact it goes from being in people's heads to being on paper, so the fact if they're the ones who aren't available, we can continue that business continuity. And going back to your earlier question with regards to how we would deal with the telephones going out, the computer systems going down, we have a developed plan within Strata, and we work with that to ensure the fact that we understand it. However, there was a change that was in the latter part of November 24 with regards to it being published, and so therefore sometimes these things don't filter down into plans as quickly as they do. So hopefully we can reiterate that and get on board. We have a grip of this with regards to every week with regards to reviewing what's going on in the plans, and I have offered out regular meetings for my colleagues to come and speak to me. And there are other aspects, but I'll leave it to that. So.
Thank you very much for that report, Dave. Much appreciated. So, does anybody have any questions with a working microphone? Councillor Loudon.
I don't think I can blame the technology. I think it was the user that mucked that one up, frankly. Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to make the points that I was going to make in the previous section. Actually, they're probably better off here. And I'm just picking up on a couple of colleagues talking about the housing electrical safety. And it sparked my memory to go back to, if I recall, the end of 2023 and sitting in this chamber. And you might recall wearing a different hat as a member of the HRB. I can remember sitting here and there being discussions about anxieties around some aspects of that issue. And I was interested to note in the report that we're now considering, if colleagues look at page 35, they look at page 36, and if they look at page 43, on each of those pages there are 2 registered items around housing electrical safety. My interpretation, and colleagues from SWAT will tell me if I have interpreted them incorrectly, they seem to demonstrate that we as a council have listened to the concerns, and we have taken steps in order to address them. As I say, if SWAP colleagues think I'm erring there, they will tell me.
Thank you, Councillor Loudon. Yes, Councillor Barlow.
Just on that point, on page 43, it says that housing is hoping to procure a bolt-on system. Now, I think we've discussed this before in council. It's a very limited amount, but again, I think this was issues with our IT system, whereas we could buy one off the shelf, which would have been quicker to do. But how long is it going to take? You're hoping to? I mean, that I think is something that, again, and I always say with housing electrical safety, I do, I know this won't be cheap, but I have concerns over, I wonder how many people at home ever check their electrical systems on a regular basis. And I know we have to by law, and I suppose we have to do that. But again, if we're hoping to buy, can we not just procure it rather than hoping to procure it?
So I think your point is probably better addressed at the HRB, actually. So I don't think it's really a question for SWAP, who are passing on the comments of the officers responsible for that. But thank you. Any other questions or points that, yes, Yehudi?
So ask, what is the biggest risk in the business continuity plan? Is it computer failure? Is it staff leaving all of a sudden? I'm sure it's not me breaking a leg.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah.
So there are two main risks that as we work through it, and they're the two that you've named. So ICT is probably one of our biggest failures, but actually it's probably one of our strongest. It's one of our greatest strengths, and our workforce. If we had another pandemic with regards to that, that would be a key issue for us. There are other risks that are documented, and we have a risk register which is linked to our corporate risk register, which identifies all of the local risks that are. But the main focus that we do about 7 or 8 of them. They focus around people, ICT, the processes that are associated with that, and then we go on to loss of building, loss of telecoms, loss of utilities. But we have workarounds in regards to that. So we have WorkSmart 22 Plus, which relies on IT to be able to deal with most of the risks outside of loss of people and loss of ICT. So we're quite comfortable with regards to that. The other thing that I forgot to mention was that we have just started with Strata becoming part of the cyber working group for the Local Resilience Forum. So the Local Resilience Forum is that emergency response aspect that we deliver as a partnership for the whole of the Devon and Cornwall area, so that we understand that, we can horizon scan and we can see what's coming up. So I work very closely with my colleagues in Strata with regards to understanding how the things that they do. So they had a Strata business continuity exercise at the beginning of this year, which we were part of, but I wasn't, so I couldn't comment with regards to it as part of the audit because it wasn't part of our plan. But we had colleagues from East Devon that were present at that. So to reassure yourself as the committee that is taking place, and we are linked in. They are a different organisation, but you wouldn't recognise that they're a different organisation in regards to how we work and how we share information. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Barlow again.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, while we've got senior management here, is the in-phase implementation, it was progressing but was behind schedule, now expected to be implemented by July 25? Has it been implemented now?
Is this relevant to this particular point on the agenda, Councillor Barlow? I can't see.
Sorry, when we have questions asked to different departments later on, to make sure that we are getting the data through. The in-phase system was supposed to be in line, it's behind schedule, but it's hoping to be implemented. It's now expected by July 25. I just want to know, is it, so that we are ready for the future?
As we have SLT here. That's a good response.
Thank you, Chair. At the moment, Ian, it hasn't been implemented as yet. We're still working with the providers of the system to enable us to implement in phase for East Devon District Council. But what I can do is get you an update on the roadmap for implementation.
That's fine.
And through you, Chair, but is that going to cause us problems for when you're chasing your officers to make sure that we get? Because in a minute we're going to have the Grant Thornton report where we've got to have this data back on a timely manner. Otherwise, we will not get our accounts signed off. So, is that going to affect us, or are you going to have to chase them physically around the room?
Yeah, thank you.
No, that's a different process completely.
Councillor Goodman.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few questions regarding Pacific risk. First of all, page 39, where it talks about climate change. First of all, it's not true that climate change doesn't come to committee, because it comes to scrutiny. It's been coming to scrutiny now for the last 2 years, and it's due again later this year. And what concerns me there is the importance of this, of climate change, because when you read page 67 of the Grant Thornton report, it clearly says there the importance of local government is pivotal in mitigating and adopting changes. My concern with what I'm seeing here is it's not clear what's going to happen with climate change in terms of the action plan, because it's saying that basically the local government reorganisation is likely to come across here as an issue. So I'm just wondering, what are we going to do as an authority going forward on climate change, because it's unclear on this report.
So, on that specific question, I'm not proposing that we go through item by item for the 108 items that are outstanding on the management list, but I'm sure senior management will address it in due course, and I'm sure you can probe them with your scrutiny hat on at the appropriate junction when climate change does come, and refer to these points that have been raised at that point. Okay.
It's just that the report says one thing, and I'm not sure it's coming across how important climate change is.
I appreciate
in
that,
this
Councillor,
report.
but we're not here to scrutinise each individual response on this. We can understand the responses. We can look at what's overdue and what's on time, but I don't think this is the appropriate forum for us to scrutinise individual responses on those particular subjects. Did you have another question?
I will send to Simon a list. I got 4 or 5 other points on Pacific risks where we are on them. I'll send them to Simon to look at rather than go through them today. Quite happy to do that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Just on the, if I may, on the local government transparency audit. Whilst we've got officers here, I mean, a number of the priority 2 items were saying that information is essentially outdated. I mean, is it fair? I won't put words in your mouth, but with local government reorganisation underway, it's really important. I would attest that these things are brought up to date, and I would hope that there's a lot of work going on in the background to make sure that these are our list of local authority land, for instance. That's going to be crucial when it comes to LGR, and similarly with social housing assets, etc. So we can't have outdated lists that we're working from.
Yeah. So with the transparency code, it was something particularly the monitoring officer asked SWAP to look at, because we felt we were weak in that area. Right. It's mainly around, if you read the report, specifics that the authority has to publish in terms of meeting the transparency code. A lot of so in terms of the overall ownership of that, we've now defined where that should sit in terms of monitoring to make sure we comply with the code. That wasn't there previously, so the monitoring officer has now placed that responsibility into the Information Governance Board, so they can have an oversight. And then there are individual recommendations being made in particular services to ensure that we get those the data set up to date. I didn't foresee many particular issues in those recommendations. I think it's just a matter of fact, just a matter that we've let it drop off the edge of the desk in terms of keeping up to date. But I think the data in the main is there, and it's just making sure we report it correctly in the data set for the transparency code. There were one or two areas whereby we've got to research in terms of, for example, one of the requirements is in my area for procurement card spend. That's something we don't get as an electronic data file. It's something that's recorded on, at the moment, on spreadsheets to authorise off expenditure. So some of those things we just have to look at how is the easiest way to get that onto the website data.
Many thanks. If there are no other points, then the agenda item or the recommendation for this is that we note the report, and we give thanks to SWAP for their report and attendance for this meeting. But the report is noted and the contents noted. Thank you. I'll move on to agenda item 9, which is External Audit Plan 2024-25. That's on pages 62 to 109, and it's a report from Peter Barber from Grant Thornton. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So, as the Chair said, this is item 9. This is our audit plan, setting out our approach to discharging our responsibilities for 24-25. Conscious, we did speak at length about this in the pre-meet, but just to remind members that weren't present at the pre-meet, as your external auditor, my role is twofold. It's an opinion on your financial statements, and it's the value for money conclusion. The approach is not fundamentally different to the approach that we've adopted in prior years. The summary of the main areas of focus is set out on page 74 of your papers. An important element of the opinion work is the receipt of the accounts, and very pleased to be able to report that this year the Council has produced its accounts in accordance with the national deadline, which is really positive and an improvement on the prior year. That's particularly important because the way that we discharge our opinion role within local government is a substantive one, which means that we wait in the main to get the draft accounts, and then we test those numbers disclosed in those draft accounts by testing the detail. And obviously we cannot do that until we've got the draft accounts. Now, in terms of that work, you will see a link within these papers to the accounts themselves. Once again, at the pre-meet, we did discuss the accounts themselves and the fact that they run to 130 plus pages. And I did indicate that that is broadly consistent with what I see elsewhere. There is one of my sets of accounts that are over 250 pages, but they are detailed. They contain lots of information, and to a large extent, the length of those accounts is driven by the requirements under the Code of Audit Practice. And as part of our audit, we will look at all disclosures in every page within those accounts. But as you would expect, we do focus at on the areas of greatest risk. And hopefully, when I do come to sign the accounts, for which the deadline for this year is the end of February 2026, but we're working to the end of the calendar year. When I do come to sign those accounts, I don't sign to the pound. I sign to what we call a materiality figure. And you'll see that on page 74 and in more detail further within the report, the materiality we've set for East Devon District Council for 24-25 is just over 2 million, 2.025 million, but we do apply a lower materiality for senior officer remuneration, given the sensitivities around that. So any disclosure within the accounts, and when I talk about the accounts, I mean the primary statements, and once again, we did discuss these at the pre-meet. So the accounts do contain, amongst other things, the 4 key primary statements: the balance sheet, the movement in reserve statement, the changes in reserves, the cash flow statement, and the comprehensive income and expenditure account. So any disclosures or any lines in those 4 primary statements above that materiality figure of just over 2 million will be subject to enhanced audit procedures. And then we then consider significant risks, which is where we devote most of our audit time. And you'll see on page 74 that we've listed those again this year. They are exactly the same as prior years. The first one is management override of control. And this is where we look at those elements of the accounts that are subject to greatest estimation and judgment. And the key element of that is journals testing. So journals is a really important and involved element of our work. Once we've got the general ledger downloaded and we're happy that that reconciles to the accounts and the TV, what we can do is use some software to cut that general ledger, and it enables us to drill down on the journals and risk assess and pick out journals for testing. We will send them off to yourselves, to officers, who will be required to provide evidence to suggest that those journals are appropriate, because journals are, should an organisation wish to do so, a very easy way of moving monies between cost centres, account codes, or dare I say financial years. So we'll be doing that work there on journals and those areas of estimation and judgment. The second significant risk is property, plant and equipment, very large figure at the top of your balance sheet. I know we've had discussions on this in prior years, and that is a figure that is subject to significant estimation. You use your own valuers to do that, and we challenge them to make sure we're comfortable with that. And this is one of the areas where we have tried to be more proactive this year. So whilst you will see that we're not intending to start the detail work until October, we do actually have a meeting with finance officers on the 12th of August to discuss that property, plant and equipment valuation and get some early work underway that will assist us when we come on site later in the year. And the third significant risk is in relation to the pension liability. So once again, historically been a very large net asset within the liability section of your balance sheet. Over recent years, given improved returns, the pension fund has improved its position, but nonetheless, whilst the liability or asset position might be smaller, we're still talking about significant sums of your share of the assets held by the pension fund and your share of the liability. So there's lots of work that goes in from ourselves in getting assurance over those disclosures. And once again, we rely on letters of assurance from our colleagues who undertake the audit of Devon Pension Fund. So those will be the key areas of focus. The only other area I really wanted to mention in relation to the accounts is IFRS 16. So hopefully from reading this plan, you'll note that there is a new accounting standard that is applicable for local government for 24-25, and this is about right of use assets. So understanding the nature of your leases as a lessor and a lessee, and whether any of those arrangements result in any control that may necessitate, under this new standard, you including those assets in the top of your balance sheet, the corresponding liability in the bottom of your balance sheet. The big risk here is about completeness and about the information that you hold as a council, one, to be able to identify the leases and the nature of those, and then secondly, if you believe that they fall under the remit of IFRS 16, how you value them. And one of the areas we will be looking at this year is to get assurance that the disclosures you have demonstrate that completeness element as well as the valuation. Now, this plan was produced a while back. This was the first audit committee that we had to present it. So I think it is important, Chair, at this stage, whilst this is the plan setting out our approach, some progress has been made already in moving the opinion work forward. So I'm conscious that previous meetings we have discussed some of the causes for some of the challenges in prior years. So one of the important things that we did agree to do at previous meetings was undertake some early sample selections. So in doing that, one of the key requirements is for us to watch you, and we do it via Teams, download the general ledger. We then see it sent to us, and then we then check that that general ledger reconciles to the trial balance in the accounts. What that then enables us to do is pick samples, and that's a really important thing in the audit process this year. So we are due to watch the, excuse me, we're due to watch the general ledger download at the end of this month, so next week. And once we've done that, we will then, subject to it reconciling back, we will then be able to send out those detailed samples to officers who can then go away and hopefully collect that sample evidence, provide it back to us through our software, and that when we are on site in October, we can then review those, and we're not asking for them at that stage and then there being a delay. So I think that's a really important step in actually getting that assurance. The other area that I also wanted to mention was that one of the big issues last year was the bank reconciliation, and our concern as to whether that reconciliation was a reconciliation. So once again, we've asked for the bank rec for this year. That's been provided. So we've got the bank reconciliation for the year ending the 31st of March 2025. We note that there are these accumulated balances again, these notional reserves with some quite sizable amounts on them, but also we've now had this supplementary information that reconciles some of them and explains their purpose. So we've picked out a sample and we've sent some queries back to officers and asked for some evidence to support that that's appropriate. No doubt Simon will correct me if I'm wrong here, but there is a slight adjustment or write-off. I think it's approximately 41k that's been required to get that to fully balance. And hopefully, once we've done those checks, subject to those queries coming back satisfactorily, we will then be in a position to say that we're comfortable with the bank rec, which is really important because it's absolutely integral to the accuracy of the accounts. So there's lots of good things that are going on there, and we've also got a meeting coming up shortly to talk about the timing of that work once we're on site as well, and the evidence that's been provided to date to make sure we can align that and everybody is clear on the timings. So I think there is some assurance that this committee can take from the changes we've implemented with officers over the last 6 months, but clearly the big challenges ahead of us and the next 6 months are absolutely crucial. So that's the accounts, as I said, they are progressing and that's good. The other area of responsibility, value for money. Value for money work is very well progressed. So the large majority of our detail work is complete. We are now making our judgments, and we were planning, past tense, to have an initial discussion with officers today to discuss emerging findings. We weren't able to deliver those emerging findings today due to sickness on our side, in particular Joe, who is the author of the report on the findings, has been ill, so we weren't able to do that. But we have looked to rearrange that, and I think from recollection it's the 14th of August that we're now due to meet with Tracy and Simon to discuss the emerging findings. On the back of that, we will be able to turn around a draft report pretty quickly, and the aspiration is that that VFM report will, subject to the agreement of the findings, come to the next meeting of this committee, which is on the 18th of September. And obviously that will then be an interim report subject to the completion of the draft accounts. So, Chair, I'll probably stop there, but that's my attempt at trying to summarise where we are on each of the two areas, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that. And I note that we were also blessed with the attendance of John Symes. So he's the one who's sweating to try and get all of this information done, I'm sure. Having sweated to get the accounts in on time, I guess, on the website. So again, well done on that, John. But I don't know if you've got any comment or anything you'd like to say in terms of how we are now in terms of our preparations and this download of the TV stands for trial balance, by the way, just in case anybody was questioning. Yeah, excellent. John.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just to confirm, really, a lot of work is already happening in terms of the trial balance. That report has been run. We've done checking up front, so that process will go through next week. We've learned lessons from last year in terms of data on the trial balance on the system. One or two of the sampling issues we had, we're putting data into the system slightly differently, which we're hoping will therefore help through that process itself. So another little win, but no less a win. The team are being prepped, as well as getting ready for the audit. Things like what we've discussed previously about putting front sheets on the working papers, everything like that, which will help the flow and understanding of information, hopefully. But we've also just been looking more generally at our workload throughout the year, our annual plan. For example, the main audit period being October to December. Normally that is very, very busy for us as a team in terms of budget preparation, but we've looked at that timetable to bring forward work into the summer months So again, it's just going to free us up at the right time in order to get information back to external audit, as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
From outside committee, Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. Before I turn to sections 3 and 6 in Grant Thornton report, I just wanted to reflect very briefly on the latter comments that Peter was making, and then the comments that John Symes was then feeding into this. And I suppose the takeaway for me is that some people will sit there and say, surely it's easy, you just look at your money, you look at your balances, as you do at home, you just get your statement and then you check your cash under the bed and it all reconciles and it's dead easy. Public sector just do an awful lot of things in a very, very haphazard way, some would say. And it's exactly the same as we heard earlier on about IT systems. You have IT systems and then they need to be adapted, changed, upgraded. It's dead easy, isn't it? No, it's not. These things are complicated, complex, and take a lot of time and resources. But, so, turning to the report, if I look at section 3, and again, if I may, Chair, if I can ask Peter, in the same way as our SWAT colleagues, if I say something, and I suppose I'm looking to Peter to validate my interpretation, and I look to him to tell me I'm right or wrong. So we've got in section 3 significant risks identified, and there's 4, I think, from memory, 5 maybe. So if I turn to page 77, there's 2 on page 77, and they both start off by saying the presumed risk has been rebutted. In layman's terms, it's okay. It's been proven. We're comfortable with that. That's my first interpretation. I look to Peter for that.
So before you go on, Peter, do you just want to clarify John's understanding of that?
Thank you, Chair, and perhaps I should have included this within my initial introduction. So you're absolutely right. There are 2 additional significant risks that were reported here on page 77, both of which have been rebutted, which essentially means that we do, whilst they are normally significant risks in a lot of entities, a lot of organisations, in the case of East Devon, we do not consider them to warrant inclusion as a significant risk because of the controls in place. So these are around income and expenditure, essentially. Now, as you can imagine, in a business down the road, income is pretty fundamental to a business's set of accounts in terms of profit, dare I say manipulation, performance-related pay, return to shareholders, getting money from the bank. Actually, the income risk is slightly less in local government generally. Your income streams are pretty well defined. We talked earlier about council tax and business rates being the main streams, and they're very well controlled. Strong systems in place generally. You have other forms of income, but they're generally well controlled. So we do not elevate income, and similarly the same applies with expenditure, to the same level that, dare I say, you would in other businesses. Just to be absolutely clear, there is huge sums of money going through on both of those systems. So they're absolutely tested, and we do detailed sampling. We talked earlier about operating expenditure, for example, where we will be testing large numbers of invoices and transactions to make sure that they're appropriate, but we just don't elevate it to the same amount. And that's essentially what the rebuttal means.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, Councillor Loudon, you next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Peter, for that reassurance. And I'm sure when you say income, your comments about income, I was thinking about how Simon might have been thinking at that point. So we have a few other significant risks, and you comment there on what the audit process will do. I was just intrigued because one of them, which is at page 79, and you talked about it, is the Devon Pension Fund. Now, we as an employer, we pay into that, as do, I suspect, the majority of I hope, the majority of our staff. Well, for their benefit and for society's benefit. But we are but one part of that larger fund. By its very description, it's the Devon fund. And I'm just wondering how you are able to drill down into that in terms of looking at our element within that. I don't know the detail, whether it's a bit like having a bank account and you've got the money over here for your electricity, you've got money over here for your gas. So whether it's Mid Devon's account is there and East Devon's is there, I'd be interested to see how much you can gain from doing that. I suspect quite a lot, otherwise you wouldn't be spending time on it. And bear with me, Chair, if I just then go to the VFM arrangements under Section 6, I'm looking at that, and I think I'm looking at page 90, Peter, and I think you talked there about identifying some risks and potentially adding as the year goes on, and I get that as you've done in the past, interestingly. At page 90, there are three initial risks I'm seeing. Is that the extent of what it is at this point you, as Grant Thornton, are identifying? Because if it is, I risk kicking myself here. That seems to me to be quite a small number, a manageable number. But again, I'm sure you'll tell me otherwise. Chair.
Peter, are you okay to respond?
Yeah, so I'll make sure I get this in order. So the pension fund issue first, and John may be able to elaborate on this. So you're absolutely right. You have Devon Pension Fund, and clearly Devon Pension Fund holds assets across a number of admitted bodies. So there'll be a large number of admitted bodies that are bought into the Devon Pension Fund, and there will be a very large asset base, billions of pounds, and East Devon will have a share of that asset base. And there will be liabilities that have been accrued based on future payments to existing pensioners, deferred pensioners, people currently employed who will retire in the future, and they make assumptions. And when I say they, it's not the pension fund that does that, it's the actuary that works on behalf of the pension fund. So you'll end up with a pension fund like Devon that might have 2.5 billion of assets, 2.9 million pounds of liabilities. It's got 400 million of net position that's shared over the admitted bodies, including East Devon. You will have a share of it, so you might have a certain amount of assets and you'll have a certain amount of liabilities, and the net position will be reported, and it's called the IS-19 disclosure in your accounts. For many years it's been in the bottom of the balance sheet because it's been a net liability. We are now seeing some councils where it's moving to the balance sheet, to the top of the balance sheet, because it's moved to a net asset position, although you've got restrictions on what you can do. So that IS-19 disclosure is calculated by the actuary for the pension fund, and every admitted body, including yourself, that wants to include this within their accounts, writes to the actuary and says, can you tell me what the net position is for us at the 31st of March 2025? And they go away and they look at member data that they hold on those members, and they work out the liability and the shares, and they provide a figure back to the council, and John and colleagues slip that into the accounts, and we come along, we review the actuary's assumptions, we write to the auditors of Devon Pension Fund, who just so happen to be Grant Thornton as well, and say, can you check the member data that the right information has been provided by East Devon for the pension fund that's then been passed on to the actuary to calculate it. And there is a whole raft of other things we do that seek to gain assurance that that IS-19 pension fund disclosure is correctly stated, including all the subsidiary notes. Do you want me to pause there, or do you want me to go on to the VFM?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, and then to your second point on the value for money, just on page 90, just to be clear, the three areas there are the three areas we're required to look at as your external auditors. So, as I explained to members who were in the previous, VFM for local government is about the National Audit Office Code. The National Audit Code specifies what we look at. We don't look at everything. We look at the areas that the NAO specifies. Financial sustainability, budget setting, monitoring, reporting, what happens if you're overspending an area? What corrective action do you take? How do you plan into the medium term to bring out invest to save, bring about service efficiencies, governance, decision based on complete and accurate information, risk management, lots of stuff that this committee does as those charged with governance, and the 3 E's, economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. So when we do our work, we look at each of those areas, and within the NAO code, National Audit Code, they have subsections within each of those 3 areas that we're required to explicitly comment on when we do. In terms of the risks that we identified at the planning stage are actually set out in summary again on page 74. And financial sustainability was a risk that we knew about at the planning stage, because we had lots of concerns last year about the HRA and the overspends on repairs and maintenance and the reductions in balances, etc. So whilst we were always going to look at financial sustainability, and we would look at it from a general fund point of view, we were absolutely doing extra work on the HRA to understand what's happening with the HRA and the financial health of the HRA at East Devon. And the second one there is around governance. And the governance one is about the very thing we've been talking about earlier, which is the ability of the council to produce complete, accurate and timely accounts in accordance with the published deadline and support the audit process to enable us to get to a position where we can sign off. And obviously that is about governance, because if you don't have those accounts signed off, then the risk is, well, is that the true position of the council financially? Is it the true position of the money's coming in and going out? And therefore, whilst you can make decisions based on what you think the balance sheet is and the health of the organisation, it's harder to set budgets and do service planning if you haven't got that complete confidence that you are clear on reserves and whether you can use any or whether they need topping up as part of your annual budget setting process. So it's a governance issue about decision making.
Okay, thank you. I have Yehudi next.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you could help me out. What is how do I pronounce it, materiality? And why does it seem to be an arbitrary figure? Because you seem to have increased it from 1.4% to 1.6% without asking my permission.
Peter, have a go. Sorry, you need the microphone, Peter.
So if somebody said to me, audit these accounts, how long is that going to take me and how much detail do I go into? Well, if I wanted to audit those accounts and say they are correct, it would take me forever, because how much detail, the only way I can do that is to look at everything. So we don't look at everything. We try to get enough confidence in the accuracy of those accounts. So we use what we call a materiality figure, which means that actually, if we are comfortable that if there are errors in those accounts below that threshold, actually they don't really make that much difference in terms of the reader of the accounts. I mean, you're spending tens of millions of pounds here, so actually, if it was a £300,000 difference, really would that fundamentally change the reading of those accounts to whoever's got interest in those accounts? So we set a threshold, and that threshold under all auditing standards is based on normally a percentage of your spend. So we'll look at your gross spend and we will apply a percentage. And within an audit approach, we have to pick a percentage between 0.5 and 2.5%. And we pick a percentage based on risk. And therefore we've applied a percentage, done it based on, at the planning stage, we based it on the prior year accounts, because we didn't have these when we did this plan. We will update it now that we've had the draft accounts. So it will probably go up slightly more. But that just over 2 million was based on your spend times a percentage. And we're of the view that actually if I get enough confidence that your accounts are accurate to within that £2 million threshold, that's good enough for the stakeholders that we discussed earlier.
I understand now.
Thank you. Charlotte, did you have a question? No, sorry, I thought I saw you put your hand up. Okay, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Well, one for Simon. So we've heard Peter's what he's going to require. Are we confident our staff are ready to reply with enough detail so that we don't get into the stage that we did last year where it wasn't enough and then we're coming back and then we're running out of time? And I know we're trying to pull it forward to get it done by December. Are we confident we're going to get it done by December? That's for Simon. And on the other point was the financial stability of the HRA. So we've got major things going on in that in a minute, and I just wondered, it says you're doing more work on this, but when is that likely to be completed, Mr. Peter? And yeah, are you happy with where we are at the moment?
Okay, Simon first. Thank you.
How to answer that? So I think you've heard the progress we've made, the lessons learned from last year. Can I guarantee? No. I may have COVID may hit our finance team and they all may go off now till Christmas. So I can't guarantee, but I can guarantee that we've put in place the steps we believe necessary in order to meet the deadline and the requirements of audit. You've heard John talk about, you've heard Peter talk about the elements that we've brought forward in terms of testing, data. Last year we were, the data sets weren't sent back quick enough to Grant Thornton, so that's being done earlier this year so that they can get their data, send us back what they require, and we can respond earlier. So that's actually done before audit come on site. John's discussed the extra checks we put over the working papers that we've prepared to date, ready for audit, and their system was up and running early in terms of the questions that they're going to ask us. So we've got that before them coming in. We've started preparing the answers for them now. So we're trying to do all we can to get ahead of the game. Can I guarantee it? No. I'm happy at this stage.
Okay. In terms of your second question, so the HRA is being examined as part of the VFM report. The VFM report is coming to this committee on the 18th of September. So does that answer your question?
Well, no. That's just a report coming then. I just wondered if we could have any update. Is he happy?
Is who happy? Peter?
Peter's the auditor.
Well, I think it's appropriate for him to conclude the report first, which isn't concluded. Peter, do you want to add anything?
I mean, the work is well progressed, but we are still finalising judgments, and it wouldn't be inappropriate to share it in this forum yet without sharing it with officers first, and then. But we are looking to get the report out. The aspiration is to come to September committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Goodman.
Can I just put a positive spin on what we've heard in terms of the accounts? The committee will remember where we were a year ago or under a year ago, and the commitment from Simon and Peter to look at ways of making sure we got this right for this year. And I've heard nothing but positivity from both of you that we're really working towards it. And I think both of you should be thanked for what you've done. Because it's not easy doing accounts, we know that. But I think we're in a much better shape from what I hear today than we were last year. And I have every confidence in you, Simon, that we'll get there.
Through the chair, I'd like to bring John into this as well.
Done. Yeah, thanks. That's noted, and I'm sure very much appreciated, Councillor Gibbon. Just whilst I've got John here as well, my understanding, John, was that we didn't believe that we had any qualifying leases under IFRS 16. Is that the case, or is it not the case?
As per the accounts, there are operational leases that have been identified that have gone into the accounts. I think it's note 33 from memory that provides that detail. So yeah, they're currently correctly recorded on the balance sheet.
All right, thank you. No, that's great. Any other questions for Peter? Well, thank you, Peter. Again, there's no recommendation here, but we appreciate the update and the report on the audit plan, and we're heartily encouraged at the progress to date, and I look forward to the report again in September. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to agenda item 10, which is risk report, and waiting patiently on this machine here is Joe Avery. So welcome, Joe.
Joe, can you talk just to see if we can pick you up?
We might have to unmute yourself, Joe.
Or is it me? No, Joe, we can't hear.
Oh, hello.
Oh,
Can you hear me? Testing, testing.
We've got that. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, working.
Yes. So
yeah, thank you.
hold on, Joe. So this is a risk report for Q1 25-26, and it's on pages 110 to 112. And Joe Avery, over to you, Joe, if you'd like to introduce your report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for letting me come to your committee today, and I'm very sorry that I'm not there in person. I had a little accident in my kitchen. I didn't do a risk assessment when I took dinner out of the oven the other evening, and yes, came a little bit of a cropper, unfortunately, so I do apologise for not being there. So yes, wanted to present a sort of starter report for yourselves, for the committee, on the risk register, so strategic and operational risk register. As you know, we undertook quite a bit of work through 24-25 in undertaking a full review of both the strategic and operational risk registers, and we had some workshops that we held with Gallagher Bassett, and we've also had a look at our risk policy and framework, which I'm hoping an updated version of that will be coming to you later in the year. We've made some amendments and changes to the risk register. So what I've done is, this is just a starting point, I feel, for this current report. So it's to take a bit of a snapshot of where the strategic and the operational risk registers are. What I would say is the full risk register is on quite a large spreadsheet. It's quite a complex document. So I didn't want to rush in with just saying, here's the whole risk register, and everybody kind of go, oh heck, what is all of that? So I've given you a bit of a snapshot, and just sort of a bit of a highlight kind of overview. So firstly, taking the strategic risk register, we've got 18 risks currently on there, each of which have been scored by the responsible officer, and a little bit of detail given on some of the controls and control actions that are in place. So one of the things that I think it's important to move towards, and which we've started with the new risk register, is that we have controls in place for risks where it's appropriate. But I also think there's a need to have risk actions in place, which are slightly different. So we may have a risk that one of the controls could be that we have a certain policy or procedure in place to mitigate actions. But actually, we may need to undertake some training. That would be an action that we need to take, and we need to put a date by when we say we're going to do it, and actually have, so we have the control, but we also have an action that we need to take. And I think there's quite a distinction, and I think moving forward, it'd be really good if we start making those distinctions and actually monitor progress of those actions and the actions falling out from the risk register. So yeah, the risks, the 18 risks are provided for you as an overview there on the Strategic Risk Register Overview Report. Operational Risk Register, so again, went round and had some workshops with each of the senior managers from the directorates, worked through, met with them on several occasions from each of the 4 directorates, doing some work to build their operational risk registers. Currently, we have 106 on there, and we do have a couple of risks that have been noted as high risks. And one of the things that ELT in particular, I think, really feel that needs to be worked on moving forward is to be doing that sort of peer challenge work with each other, just to sort of say, are we happy with how we're scoring the risks? Are we sure that that isn't a higher risk than maybe what we've actually noted? So so I think it's been good that we've started to have some of those conversations, or that the senior management have started to have those conversations about risk over the last year, and hopefully moving forward to a better place in terms of our risk management and risk understanding. So again, I've pulled a brief overview report for you, just giving you the headlines as to what's on the operational risk register. So hopefully that gives you a starting point as a committee. I've also put on the report a timetable for future reporting, just to start setting that better discipline in terms of reporting from the risk register of when you should be having a report coming to you about the state of both the strategic and the operational risk registers. And what I was going to suggest, I haven't made it a recommendation here, but what I was going to suggest is that perhaps some of the committee might like to meet with myself and possibly with Simon, just to have a look over the complete risk register so that you get to see what it looks like, and then maybe think about the things you want to pick out if it's not quite right what's being reported to you now, about what you'd like to see come to the committee in the future. And I'm happy to explore that with whoever would be excited by the idea of looking through the
I can
risk
think of one,
registers.
Joe, at least.
So yes, but so yeah, they're presented there for you to start the conversation. As I say, I'm conscious that this is something that's been missing for a little while. We have been working behind the scenes, trying to get the register to a place where we can report on it. I think we're now at that place, but we need to work together to see how you want to report moving forward. But happy to take questions, obviously. The only thing I would say, I am struggling to hear a bit of what's being said. So yeah, if you have some questions, then do talk quite loudly, because as I say, I'm struggling a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And if needs be, then what we'll do is I can repeat questions that are raised if you can hear me clearly. So that's great. But thank you. Questions from the committee or outside? So from the committee, Councillor Goodman. I know you didn't raise your hand, but I know you got some questions.
Look, it's a good start. What I would say is that I think we need to look at when you do a risk assessment, you look at what are the processes currently in place, and then you say, what is your risk? You then say, well, actually, to reduce that risk, we should put these mitigations in, and then you get your residued risk. Because at the moment, when you look at all the overall mitigated risk, a lot of those processes, the actions, haven't yet been put in. You clearly can see that.
Councillor, let's deal with this one at a time if we can. Okay, so there's an assertion there. So I'd like to put that assertion. Did you hear that, Joe? So. Not fully. Okay, so what Councillor Goodman is saying is that as the report reads at the moment, we're showing mitigated risks where the mitigation itself has not yet been employed, if you like. So is that an accurate reflection?
So in terms of some of the actions, yes, there are some actions that we're working towards, but all of the mitigated, what I asked officers to do was to think about what controls you have in place, which should be listed, and then score it with those things that you currently have in place. And then think about what actions you may be taking. So not all of the risks have got full actions on yet, because as I say, this is a change for senior leadership in terms of the way we're thinking about this. Some do, but I asked them specifically to score the mitigated risk based on what controls they have in place at the moment. And then obviously as the actions get completed, that may change again. So yes, does that help?
I think that explains how we, or the report that we're looking at clearly, thank you, and the process that we've got to, or that's been undertaken to get here. Before we go back to Mike, because I'm sure he has further questions and challenges on this, I'd like to perhaps take this opportunity to accept your offer of meeting certain members of the committee to sort of review it on a one-to-one once your kitchen incident is cleared up, and we can hopefully run through this the methodology and the report itself in a bit more detail for those who, because Councillor Goodman has a background in risk, as we know, So perhaps that will be the most appropriate use of everybody's time for us to go through that in a bit more detail at that stage, if that's okay with you. Would that be okay? Yeah.
That would be absolutely fine with me.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Does anybody else have any other particular questions then that they'd like to raise with Joe?
Could I just suggest that once we've done that work, we bring it back here, because there's a lot of things I could say, and I'm not going to, it's not appropriate, but I think having a meeting with the group would be really valuable. I really do. And it's not about criticising, it's about how we can improve it, is the way I look at that, Joe.
Absolutely. This is totally a two-way conversation, isn't it? About how actually we inform the committee of what's in there, and that you get best sight that you need, so that you're assured that actually, that this is happening, that there's some risk management going on, and that you're happy with it. So yeah.
Great. And in respect of that, I note that on your report, you're suggesting a report submission for A&G on the 4th of November anyway. So actually, if we stick with that as a sort of the next stage that we review this, that should work for all concerned. Okay. Fantastic. So we have a recommendation, and sorry. Question from Rob.
It's not a question, it's just say, subject to availability, I wouldn't mind being on that one session as well, if possible.
Absolutely. So what we'll do is we'll put an invitation out, Alethea, to all A&G members, including Simon and Joe, and we'll come up with a meeting date where people can attend. It's not compulsory to attend, of course. Interested people can attend that meeting, and we can review this in a bit more detail, if that's okay. Is everyone happy with that? Sorry, Councillor Loudon. Yeah.
Sorry, I know I'm not in committee, and sorry. And obviously it's not for me to interfere with the committee's decision, and Joe's made a very gallant offer to you to meet with her. I suppose my anxiety, and I would say it in any committee, including Cabinet, that if we go in mob-handed, it can dilute the ability to spend quality time. And I just wonder, Chair, I know you've made a very broad offer to your colleagues in committee, and I just wonder whether you might wish to reflect upon whether it's 2 or 3 of you, because you've already had at least 2 people indicate, haven't you, to you their desire. Okay. I know I'm straying into your domain.
I appreciate the guidance from and suggestion, John. But maybe we've had 2 people express interest. Does anybody else want to attend that? So if we, Ollie. So we've got 3. So that's Councillor Davey, Councillor Goodman, and Rob, the independent member. So if I attend and Simon attends, then would everybody be happy with that? Yeah. Okay. So that should be less mob-handed than the full mob. All right. Okay. But thank you. Our recommendation then is that the Audit and Governance Committee considers the current status of the strategic operational risks following the full risk review undertaken in June 2025, there is no vote on that, so as I would assert, so we have done that. But we thank Jo very much for her report. Thank you. So we move on to the draft statement of accounts for 24-25, and this is a report by John.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm very pleased on behalf of the finance team to present the 24-25 draft statement of accounts. The draft account signed off by our very own Section 151 officer, made available on the website on the 30th of June, which we've already heard was before the deadline, and now subject to external audit. In terms of audit progress, we've already touched upon, so I won't go over that again. They are very long, very complex accounts, as you've probably seen. So at this point, I just wanted to highlight a handful of key highlights from the statements themselves, if I may, Chair. So in terms of the start of the accounts, if you like, the narrative report provides a summary of the year-end position. This includes just picking out some main lines from there. The general fund surplus position was one of a £712,000 surplus. General fund reserve balance is confirmed at £4.8 million. Housing revenue account outturn is reported as on budget, and net capital expenditure total just shy of £5 million in the year. In terms of the main statements, the movement in reserves, again, just going back to the general fund reserve balance, that was increased by £500,000 in the year, so that was as budgeted. Earmarked reserves remained largely the same. Capital grants unapplied did increase in the year. That mainly reflects grants we've received to do with the heat network, etc., and they've just yet to be applied to that capital expenditure that's coming through. Balance sheet itself, it's not actually changed in any significant manner in the year. The housing revenue account section of the accounts does confirm the agreed reduction in the HRA balance to 1.764 million. That was because of the budgeted contribution to capital of £1.3 million. But there was also an additional contribution to capital in the year of £1.9 million. So the outturn position allowed that additional revenue contribution to be made. So together that's £3.2 million, therefore reducing the debt burden and subsequent charges to the HRA. So it's positive in that manner. Collection fund in the accounts has seen an increase in income for both council tax and business rates. For business rates, the fund has improved to a deficit position of 702,000. For council tax, the EDD share of the collection fund is 465,000. So in terms of regarding the outturn, recommendations are being made to Cabinet, which will ask for the transfer of that general fund surplus, 712, to the medium-term financial plan risk reserve. There's also a recommendation being made to transfer £150,000, which was homelessness grant related, into the new financial year, just to help that service with spend demand, given reductions in grant funding moving forward. Following the external audit that we've discussed, the accounts will be represented to the committee for approval, and again, this should be in the new calendar, earlier in the new calendar year. The final section of the accounts themselves is the annual governance statement. If I can, Chair, I was going to pass over to Simon to introduce that section.
As long as he was aware of that, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure, thank you.
I just wanted going on to
that would be a good idea, actually, Simon. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you. We have any questions on the accounts from outside the committee or inside the committee? Well, everyone's blissfully happy with your accounts, John. So absolutely fantastic. We had a bit of a Q&A session earlier, and one of the outcomes of that was actually, as you alluded to yourself, the accounts are pretty complex, and they're complicated enough to the trained eye, let alone to the lay person. And a suggestion that was made was perhaps we could have an accounts teach-in, whereby we, this will put pressure on you, but maybe a half hour or an hour before the next A&G, or the November one, whichever timings permit, we're taken through them. frankly. So there's a bit of guidance from officers as to here's the page to turn to. Here's what we're looking at here. Here's what it means. Any questions? And we can have an explanation and a bit of a Q&A on the salient points of the accounts, if that's all right, because I appreciate we've got some time now, but we've got a range of abilities and understandings in the committee and outside it as well, and maybe that would just bring everybody's knowledge level up to a higher level if that's okay, because they are quite complicated and difficult to follow, and it's not criticism. I know a lot of it's prescribed by SIPFA, etc. So if committee is happy with that, and John, if you'd be happy with that, Simon, then maybe we could schedule that. Would that be okay?
Absolutely, Chair. We can pick up the main statements and the interactions between them as well.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Councillor.
Yes, my apologies. I need to leave.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, thanks for turning up tonight. Thank you. Are there any other questions, John?
I suppose just following on that point, which seems eminently sensible, we do have regular lunchtime councillor briefing sessions, and it does seem to me that whilst A&G is quite clearly a very key group of people to understand the accounts, it's equally as important that the rest of us try and get a bit of a handle on it, given that we are required to receive and accept these eventually at council. So I just wonder whether it's something that may be worth liaising through through Sarah with her colleagues in democratic services.
Yeah, I think
just a thought.
That would be very sensible if we can get the timings right, so that we certainly need to do this sort of prior to December if we can. So I don't know what the schedule of planned sessions are up to that point, but we certainly need to. So either which way, if we can schedule in something either in this committee or a presentation, a lunchtime sort of briefing presentation, that would be ideal, I think. Is that okay, John? Yeah. Ian.
I just wanted to say, just on John's point earlier, the trouble is if you open it up to a big briefing, and lots of questions come in, we only get 45 minutes, whatever it is. It's just not good enough. Whereas at least here, and I know we all need to understand it, but here is even more important that we try and understand and be able to go through. So I definitely think perhaps both, if we have to, if we're going to go that way.
Yeah, I take your point, but also, I'd also say that as John's demonstrating, we are open to other attendees, so anybody could come and attend that training session as well. So either which way, spread the knowledge. So I'm not going to prescribe it at this moment in time, but thank you. And again, John, I'd really like to express my gratitude and congratulations to you for hitting the deadline and getting the accounts in on time. Major achievement, and we will. We really appreciate all the hard work that the team's put in. So thank you. Okay. In terms of the recommendation there. Oh yes.
It was only going to be very. Sorry, Chair. Is that okay? Go ahead. It was only going to be very brief in that within the statement of accounts that John's presented is the annual audit governance statement. So it gets presented as part of the accounts. I think it's right just to bring that to your attention. It starts on page 116 of the statement of accounts. I can't see people clicking, but the main if you look at page 119, and it's perhaps something you can do after the meeting because I can still take comments. So this is draft accounts, subject to audit, but within the audit and governance statement are key elements around how this authority operates. A lot of it doesn't change year on year because it's standard structures, but what I would draw to your attention is section 6 of the report. Section 6, so it could be section 5. Hang on, no, it is section 6. Section 6, which are the new areas of significant risk that we believe are right to bring to your attention in our audit and governance statement. They should be what you feel are the right things, having, knowing this council. In terms of how we build this up, a lot of the first elements are swap limited reports, because clearly they are key risks, and if we've got limited assurance, then they should go on the governance statement. Then we send out assessments to all our senior managers, who we ask them to make an assessment of their area against what's good practice over governance, whether that's they're legally compliant, they're considering public consultations. There's a whole host of things we ask every manager to check their service against. If there's any weaknesses in there, we ask them to report. So there's a couple elements in there that we've picked up. So for example, and I know members are alive to this, the number of projects ongoing at the moment for the council, big projects, lots of resource, that's a risk. So that's in here in terms of, we need to keep an eye on this, perhaps this committee needs to be aware of that, and how we're mitigating that. So that's included in there as well. In addition to those assessments by senior managers, once I compile all that information, I do send it to our Chief Internal Auditor, who Lisa plays that function, send it to your chair and the finance portfolio holder, just to get a rounded view as well. But the ultimate rounded view is this committee. So if there is anything in there that you feel we've missed as an authority, it is draft. Hopefully I haven't, but it would be useful to have that information back. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the annual governance report? Okay, right, well, that's noted. Thank you, Simon. And if we identify any further risks, then we will pass that on to you in due course. Thank you. So the recommendation is to note the draft statement of accounts 24-25 has been signed by the, yes, thank you, Lisa, has been signed by the Section 151 officer and is now brought to this committee for comment. Note that the audited statement of accounts 24-25 will be presented to the committee for approval following completion of the audit, which we all aspire to. Okay, so again, there's no vote on that, but the reports are noted, so thank you very much. And we've got on here item 12, which is financial monitoring report update. Again, are you providing that, John? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologies, it's a verbal update, but it's a matter of timings. So this is the Q1 update, so the end of June. So relatively up to date. So detailed reviews have been undertaken through the finance team, budget managers, etc. I'm pleased to say that at this stage there are no material concerns or recommended actions to report to members. Just some facts and figures for you. In terms of the general fund, Q1 outturn prediction is surplus position of £486,000. Roughly half of it, 252k, sits within service areas. 234k is a favourable position on interest receipts. Built into that forecast position, we've got two areas that we've been working on and sort of watching closely at this point, is the national insurance shortfall, which is the government grant. So we have, we're aware of that. We have anticipated that. It equates to £324,000. So that has been included. The second one is around the pay award. You may recall in terms of when the budget was being set, we set that at 2%. It's now been agreed at 3.2%. So our early estimate is that's £205,000 impact on the general fund. Both were anticipated and both are being funded from the general fund reserve at this stage. Moving on to the housing revenue account, again, it's materially on budget at this point in terms of our forecast for the entire year. Income is currently adverse to a tune of £110,000 on a £22 million budget. Percentage-wise, it's very small. Expenditure is £53,000 favourable. And also within that forecast, that includes £250,000 being transferred into the HRA reserve which takes it back up over £2 million as budgeted. In terms of the capital programme, capital expenditure for Q1 is £2.9 million. So the programme is moving along. Just to touch upon treasury management, cash balances have increased through the quarter, as is the usual trend. So as at 30th of June, internally managed sums was almost reaching 26 million. The externally managed funds remain at 31 million, with anticipated returns for the year at 1.7 million pounds. That's a very high level summary, Chair, but further information is available online through the Cabinet agenda that's now been published. Hopefully that gives you sufficient oversight at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Really appreciate the verbal update, and appreciate that you can't bring a written report to it in advance of Cabinet. But appreciate the effort on that. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. My comment is simply in relation to CapEx. Unless I've read it incorrectly, we struggle to spend our CapEx budget year on year on year on year. And is there a isn't it time for us to get real?
I'll come through the chair. I'll come in first, and then John may want to add. Yes, I think a lot of authorities do. I think our capital programmes are over ambitious. In what we're intending to do this year, partly because of the underspends, but also partly in terms of LGR as a looming backdrop, is when we normally take capital bids through the BSCAP group in terms of looking at the individual business cases for approval. And what we're doing each year is adding new schemes to our existing capital programme. What we intend to do is to do a complete review and realistic look about the projects that are already in our programme. Are we going to deliver them, and when? And what's the priorities on those compared to the new bids coming forward? That's what's intended, isn't it, this year?
Great. I think that's a major step forward. So yeah, great. Councillor Barlow.
When will that happen?
As we build up to, so it's, I think the BSCAP meeting for capital bids is late November, June? John will add detail.
Yeah, so just picking up where I left off earlier, really, it's in terms of budget prep. We're planning on picking up that internally through August, September, to feed through to, BSCAP that is normally hits in November. So yeah, and obviously the knock-on effect of that is obviously the funding side of it as well, and the financing. So the more you knock out of the capital programme effectively, that can have that effect then of reducing that interest charge, if you like, to the general fund or even the HRA. So it kind of builds, if you like, into the whole timetable.
Sounds like an eminently sensible process. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you. And appreciate the report. Thank you, John. We turn to the final item, which is item 13 on our agenda, which is the Audit and Governance Committee Forward Plan. Does anybody have any questions or concerns, comments over that? Councillor Goodman.
Just briefly, it's a big agenda. A lot of important stuff on there. I think we'd have to accept that's not going to be a 2-hour meeting, because there's some really meaty things on there.
I think it's a fair point, and we might have to look at bringing the start time for that forward a little, just to anticipate that. Yes, Peter. Sorry, Mike, could you kill the...
sorry. Just to say, there's a few items for Grant Thornton there, so I think there's some duplication there. So I think we've agreed that the VFM report is on the agenda, and I'm happy to do a verbal update on the accounts as well. So that will be the output from us.
Great, thank you. Okay, we may look at starting that meeting a little bit earlier to accommodate everything, but that's a point well made. Thank you, Mike. Okay, if there's no further comments or questions, then it just leaves me to thank everybody for coming, thank those who are watching online, and thank all officers especially for joining us and taking time out of their busy schedules. So much appreciated, and safe journey home. Thank you.